Our podcast sponsor today is strategytraining.com. If you want to strengthen your strategy skills, you can get the overall approach used in well-managed strategy studies. It's a free download, and you can go to firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. That's firmsconsulting with an S.com/overall approach. And if you're looking to advance your career and need to update your resume, you can get a McKinsey and BCG winning resume template as a free download at www.firmsconsulting.com/resume PDF. That's www.firmsconsulting.com/resume PDF. Hi, Ben. So it's not often we have a superstar like a math teacher on our podcast, Ben. I don't mean that in a facetious way. I think that teachers play a really important role in the world.
No, I really appreciate that. No, and I appreciate getting to be the teacher to go into spaces like this, right? I mean, I laugh because obviously in the world we inhabit, teachers are not often invited into the halls of power.
I know it's very surprising to me because we obviously interview lots of senior leaders, Fortune 500 companies, deans of business schools, heads of
Yeah,
departments from Harvard, Stanford, and so on. But it seems
yeah.
to me as if no one really pays attention to the people who are training these people,
No,
right?
it's true. Yeah. I wonder. I mean, I think possibly it's just hard to the expertise in teaching is not very legible. There's 100,000 math teachers in the country, more than that probably,
Yes.
and you don't know who's doing it well and who's not doing it well.
Well, that's just the thing, right? I mean, when I grew up in a culture whereby we didn't expect much of our teachers because the parents felt it was their job to put in place a
Mm,
culture of wanting to learn, whereby we
yeah.
weren't even allowed to put a book on the ground.
Mm,
It's just, you never do that. You never put a book on the
mm,
ground. You don't take
yeah.
away the teacher's attention from teaching to parenting the child. The job of the teacher is to teach, the parents to do everything else, the child to do everything else. But my view is it's become a lot more difficult for teachers today, where they're expected to do so many things besides teach. Do you also see that in your work?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's funny because I've moved around a little bit in my teaching career, so I can't speak to
Yeah,
like
sure.
a cross section, or a longitudinal kind of effect where I've seen the same place change over 15 years. But yeah, I don't know. Like during my lifetime, I see that as kind of a movement in sort of political activism in the U.S. was the kind of hope that education can be a bit of a silver bullet, that great schools can do
Yes.
all the social transformation that we want. And it's hard. I mean, you're stuck. There's a chicken and egg problem. Uh, and so I see why people want schools to be that transformative power. But it seems, from what I understand, if the research literature, there's better evidence that fixing poverty improves people's school performance than vice versa. That then you can somehow eliminate poverty in a society by just improving the schools without something more redistributive.
So those beautiful hand-drawn pieces of art you have behind you, is that your kids or your students?
A couple of these are my. Let's see. You got up there. You've got my. This is a recent one I drew. I haven't posted on the blog yet. And then the other ones I know these are my 5-year-old.
Okay.
So this is just some family portraits she did in a particularly
A
inspired
family
day. I haven't seen
portrait.
that. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's the one in the moon here is her baby sister. That's her little 1-year-old
Okay.
sister just living
Oh,
in a
she's
moon.
drawing
And I
a
think that's
sister. That's
her and
good.
the baby. I think is that one me? No, that's my wife. And then the one on
This-
top there is me. I don't know, a little faded out. Yeah, but I think she was sort of imitating my art style that day.
So, what made you decide to become a math teacher, or you didn't decide and you just kind of meandered into this?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I That's funny. The metaphor I would give, and this may not resonate with people who have ascended to the high levels of business. When I played basketball in college, and I just pick up games or intramural
Hmm.
games, I was not particularly good at basketball, but I loved being the fifth guy on the court. If there were already 5 or 6 guys playing, it's like they didn't really need me. I was just gonna let them
Yeah.
sitting on the sideline. But being the fifth guy, it's like pure benefit. Like obviously you need a fifth guy on the court. Um, and I felt a little bit that way going into math teaching. Like I know lots of great math teachers. There are lots of great people in the profession, but no one has ever said, "Oh, we've got too many math teachers." There's too
Yeah.
many talented young people are going to math education. So, as someone who enjoyed school and saw, I don't know, lots of possibilities and didn't know which one was going to appeal to me, uh, it seemed like a natural place of like, okay, I know I can go into teaching for at least a few years, and that won't be time ill spent, right? Like that'll be time that'll be interesting for me, and yeah, I won't look back at the end of those 3 or 5 or 10 years or whatever it is I spend, and or a career for that matter, and say, I wish I hadn't done math education. That was already oversubscribed.
Yes. So you're a math teacher, obviously a husband, a father to two
Yeah.
kids, I'm guessing, and
Yeah.
you
Yes.
find
Yeah.
time to
Two right
write
there.
about math. Is it part of your way of teaching math? Is that why you write?
That's a good question. The teaching and the writing have always been a little bit in tension for me, actually. They go together beautifully as activities, but there's tension in like fitting them both into a 24-hour day. So really, my career sort of had two phases. One where I was teaching full time and trying to find time to write on the side as sort of passion project, and then the reverse, where writing became my full time occupation, and I try to find time to teach classes as more or less a passion project.
So
So
now
that's sort
you
of been
are
the last.
writing full time about math,
Yeah, I've been,
teaching.
yeah, since 2017. Late 2017 is when I became a sort of full-time writer. So I've done 4 books with my publisher. And I try to find time to teach when I can. So like, I'm teaching, actually, I've got a class starting in just a week at my local community college, where the dean invited me to teach this liberal arts math course, which I'm excited about. And I like to teach, I sort of teach a course or two during the year is sort of my ideal so I'm still in the classroom and getting the like the freshness and the excitement of people learning, but then still have time for all my writing and speaking and things like that.
So you can earn an income by writing about math.
I feel like I'm living a sort of 20th century media lifestyle. Yeah, yeah. When I got my book deal, I think I was one of the last people through the kind of book to social media virality
Yes.
to like, yeah, blog to social media to book kind of pipeline. And then yeah, similarly, it's because math is sort of a niche subject with a built-in, like, I love my readers a lot, teachers and parents who are excited about math, some homeschooling parents, and a lot of kids who are just excited about math. And my publisher does beautiful books, but yeah, so I'm sort of that rare middle class author, which is, I think, was a much more common thing, say, 70 years ago than it is in the U.S. today.
And your primary audience, would it be students of maths, kids, or is it the parents, the teachers?
Yeah, there's what I aim for, and then there's the target I wind up hitting. So my dream has always been to reach curious adults who are thoughtful and enjoy reading
Yes.
nonfiction, and they like learning about the world. But math never sat easily with them. Math was always a subject in school that bothered them. Didn't resonate with them. But they'd like to heal that relationship and kind of explore the worlds that only math gives you access to. I think I definitely reach some of those readers. I get beautiful emails from people who fit that description. But I think by and large, it's families. My books are cartoon illustrated, and they're silly and playful. And so 12-year-old nieces and nephews are kind of that's my really core audience. Kids who are
Yes.
kind of excited about math and looking for something fun and different and playful. And I try to make sure my books are really different than whatever else is on the shelf. I don't feel like I'm writing another version of a book somebody else has. I think each of my books is something pretty weird and singular, and that stands apart from whatever else is out there.
And how do you find you connect with young readers? How do you know what they want? Is it because of your kids? Because you teach young people?
Yeah, my own kids are much younger than my readers. In fact, I didn't. My first daughter wasn't born until after, just like around when my second book came out.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny. I think as a teacher slash writer, you sort of wind up writing for the students, and
Yes.
so in different places where I've gone, that's I've taught different sorts of students with different sorts of interests and backgrounds, and so I think that's drawn me in different directions. The earliest writing I did was while I was teaching high school in California. That was when I first started writing about math, and these were students who were going through a charter school. And it was a very traditional, sort of rigorous,
Yes.
old school approach to education. So they were getting lots and lots of mathematical drill and very little play. And so I wrote in a register that's very familiar in educational circles, where I was sort of advocating for a more holistic and exciting and inspirational view of the subject, and something less, less narrow and memorization driven. Um,
Yes.
and that was, to some extent, those are general trends in education, but really it was just me responding to the school where I taught and the students I knew, and trying to think, what do I wish I could be giving to these students? And then I moved to the UK, lived there for 3 years, and was teaching at a private school, an independent school
Yes.
for boys. And this lovely institution, it was an interesting place to teach.
Process.
450 years old or something like that. So it founded 1552.
Yeah.
So like there was no, like, Shakespeare was not taught when the school was founded, because Shakespeare was going to be born, about
Yes.
20
Yes.
miles away, 20
And
years
he
after
wasn't
that.
good at math from what I heard. That's why he became a
Yeah,
playwright.
yeah, actually, I have no idea. No idea what his math skills are. He seemed like a generalist, but Yeah, who knows? Anyway, and so I found different things drawing me in there. In
Yeah.
some ways, the lessons were so short, and they were so busy and ambitious, the students at that school, that I think I found myself moved to try to sculpt math into these smaller, eye-catching, really find something that was really appealing and could just sort
Yes.
of fly like an arrow through the busyness of their lives and pull them in. And I also found myself writing a lot about wanting to find the philosophical side of the subject, to step back and reflect and see what role thought plays in our lives more broadly. Because
Yes.
they were such busy and tightly scheduled young people that I wanted to try to help them make space for that. And I felt so rushed when I was teaching there. The lessons were short and there weren't very many of them, and I just always felt like I was in a hurry. So that drove me. And then now I'm teaching at a community college here in Minnesota where I live. And again, that's pulling me in a different direction. It's less in this most recent book that I just wrote, which I was sort of writing as I was starting to do this teaching. But now for future writing projects, I'm thinking a lot about statistics, which is what I've been
Oh, that's
teaching
interesting. That's
recently.
my area as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah. What's your background?
My background is I have a degree in physics and I have a
Hmm.
couple of other degrees, but all related to physics. But my area of expertise, I used to be a consulting partner of the major consulting firms, but my area was
Yeah.
understanding risk and corporate
Hmm.
strategy, which is all about statistics, which most
Yeah.
people fall asleep at when you mention t-tests and so on. So you got
Yeah.
to find a way to make it interesting. So it's nice to hear someone trying to introduce statistics to kids. I've not seen that before.
Yeah. It's definitely it's making its way into the kind of K through 12 curriculum. I think, yeah, in ways, that are maybe a little rushed, some of them, and ways that are necessary and urgent. But yeah, definitely, I think the world has changed in the last 25 years just in the presence of data. And imagine, like, have you seen that change, that like when you talk about running those statistical tests, I imagine that 30 years ago, there just weren't as many, like the data was not as rich for being able to run those kinds of tests and evaluate risk. But I'm just speculating. Have you seen a change over the last few decades?
For me, it's not just the data, because in the world of management consulting, data is irrelevant. It's the hypotheses you have. And then you collect the
Yeah.
data to test the hypotheses. And in fact, too much data can
Mm,
drown out people. I feel that's happening a lot today, whereby people are
mm,
so interested about having access to data, they don't realize that when you have too much data, you need even more powerful hypotheses to know what you want
yeah.
in that data. But what I did find actually interesting is around 2005, I think it was 2004, 2005. We were working on this really interesting study for a power utility to work out how they can optimize their risk on their balance sheet. And we were plotting
Mm,
these efficient frontier curves, and the
yeah.
computing power was so weak that we had to get something like 20 to 30 laptops in a boardroom. And to plot out the efficient frontier, we had to plot out each point on one laptop, and they would be running overnight. So someone would have to come in at 10 p.m., set up each laptop. Someone had to come in at 2 a.m. and make sure that the laptop hadn't frozen or shut itself down. And then some person would come in at 7 a.m. to collect the data. So while the data has improved, I think the computing power has made it incredible what you can do on a laptop today.
Yeah, that's a great story. That makes sense. It's funny. I'll have to keep that in mind, because one of the things working with students who are just getting a handle on
Yeah.
essential visual representations of data is, and especially students learning algebra, looking just a graph of a parabola, or quadratic, something like that,
Yes.
is the idea that every point carries information. That every point
Yes.
is represents a, in the algebraic case, a solution to a curve, and in your case, right, some kind of efficient trade-off between two variables. But the idea that every that every point needed to be generated by a different laptop,
It's
that very
kind of
vividly
scary.
captures the fact that like, no, each point is not just meaningful, but is something that took 14 hours of computing time.
Yeah, one of the things I always tell people is that behind every number, there's either a long equation or a set of calculations. And you got to
Yeah.
appreciate what went into that to
Yeah.
generate that one number. One of the things that I find about math is, look, I was never a good math student when I was young. I was pretty bad at it. Not because I didn't like math, it's because I found it quite boring. But what I did do is I started reading the biographies of famous mathematicians. And then I kind
Mm.
of learned the math as a side skill to understand what they were doing. And the same thing in physics. I read the biography of Madame Curie and I thought, whoa, this sounds pretty cool, actually. I got to do this stuff. But the math and the physics were never the priority. Is more, I needed to understand it, to appreciate what they were doing, to understand why they did what they did. I think one of the problems with math is that we make math the central thing when it's a tool to help us do many things in the world. And it's one of the tools you need, but it's just a tool. And if you're good at math and you don't know how to use the tool, then you're not going to really go far in the world. I think we kind of make
Yeah.
math so scary for students. We're not teaching
Yeah.
them. It's just like English. It's a language. It's a language. If you don't understand math, you don't understand the language. You don't have to feel bad about it. Just go learn the language. Don't say you're failing math. Say that you don't know the language of math.
Yeah.
And
No,
when
no,
I
I think
work
that's
with
right.
people that way, I find it works much better for them.
Yeah. 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 Do you find you encounter a lot of people who are very turned off or intimidated by the math, even in the kind of decision-making roles that they have?
Well, I work in the world where we advise CEOs, chief financial officers of major
Yeah.
corporations, Fortune 500
Yeah.
companies.
Yeah.
And, it's not math. For most of them, it's about corporate finance, which has a lot of math that sits behind it, but
Yeah.
also statistics, right? How you collect
Yeah.
data, who you collect data from. And I find that a lot of CEOs, some of very talented CEOs, they avoid the math or the stats because they're embarrassed to say they don't know it versus saying,
Yeah.
look, this is an area I don't know. So I need to stack my board with a couple of people who can speak this language and interpret these things for me. And I think that if we let people understand that math is a language, it's one language, you don't have to know every language, then maybe bring math into their world and not hide it because they don't know about it. And I think that's what happens. There's a lot of shame around math.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe a
Yeah.
detriment to the subject.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think I see it especially among people who are high achievers.
Yes.
I think people who, maybe someone who works in the trades and is having a great career, possibly doing that, but isn't someone for whom school was an exciting moment in their life, or they didn't
Yes.
pride themselves on their academic achievement or their sort of success in the standard credentialing system. For them, math is like, oh, whatever. I didn't enjoy that, but I didn't enjoy history or English class either, so
Yeah.
it's not a big deal. But it's precisely for the people who, they went on to get a master's degree, a doctorate, an MBA, people for whom those traditional forms of success are a point of pride, and who are in managerial or creative professions. Often math didn't click in school. And it's those people in particular for whom it then is kind of this lingering bruise or this wound that doesn't quite heal and something they're a little cautious to avoid. They sort of hide it the way an animal will hide a limb where they've got a little bit of something that pains them there.
One of the things that's interesting in our world is that we hire people who are good at problem solving. Management consulting is about
Yeah.
solving complicated problems. But here's
Yeah.
something that you may find surprising, and a lot of people find surprising. We don't hire a lot of PhDs in mathematics because while they're good at solving math problems, they're not necessarily good critical thinkers. It's a very
No,
different skill.
yeah, no, it is. It is. No, and I know a lot of PhDs in mathematics and in other fields too. And
Yes.
yeah, the mathematics to pursue pure mathematics is about
It's about
it's a very
research, right?
specialized, it's a very specialized form of research though, because you need to put logical structures and ideas and possible
Yes.
lines of argument into conflict. But what you don't tend to do, I think, in mathematical research, I'm speaking a little bit beyond my own personal experience here, but I think what you don't tend to do is need to do the kinds of thing you might do in other sorts of STEM fields or in the social
Yes.
sciences, where you have the collision of totally different lines of evidence,
Well,
and
with
you need to
mathematicians,
resolve.
you are developing the language, right? Which
Yeah,
other fields
yeah,
would use.
yeah, in a sense,
Engineers
yeah,
would use the language. I remember when I was
yeah,
studying physics, we would take a problem, convert it into another language, and then another language to solve it in that language, and then convert it back into the language we started with. Right?
yeah,
So it's a very
yeah. I
interesting
think
thing. I want to switch back to your books, right?
go
Because
ahead.
they're quite
Yeah, yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
So
yeah.
your first book, what's the inspiration? Why did you go out with your first book?
Yeah, it's called Math with Bad Drawings, and the
Yes,
subtitle
math with
is
bad drawings.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, the subtitle is illuminating the ideas that shape our reality. And that one, it was a book I almost had to be talked into writing. Actually, it's been the best selling of the books I've done. But it was the goal was to kind of encapsulate math and what makes it exciting and worth learning in a single book, which struck me as sort of an impossible task, because you would never ask a history teacher to write such a book for history. Just give
Yeah.
us the highlights of history, or just give it the highlights of all of science. It would be too vast. And I sort of felt that way about math. But I think just the nature of mathematical work and mathematical research is so little understood that there's a need for a book and like that, in the way that there isn't a need for for a book about history. People sort of have a better sense maybe of what history is and what it's for and what it's about. So I sort of thought that the book would be about mathematical thinking, and so that's where I started. Is sort of what are the patterns and the habits of mathematical thinking? When mathematicians look at a piece of notation on the page, what are they seeing? What are they thinking about? What does that conjure in their minds? And so I wrote a few chapters of that, and that was about 70 pages. I was like, oh, that's not a whole book. There's a lot more to write here. And so what the rest of the book is it's a tour, it's a whistle stop tour going from between different fields where mathematics shows up and where there are simple but deep mathematical ideas that shed light on surprising areas of life. So there's a chapter on lottery tickets, which is sort of the doorway into thinking about expected value. And there's a chapter on scaling laws. The idea that if you double the size of an animal, you don't just get an animal that's twice as big in every dimension. You really change the properties. That everything from lungs to bone cross sections really depend on size. That small and big are not just rescaled versions of each other. They really change the properties.
You should send a copy of your book to the Marvel executives when they do the next Ant-Man movie. I think they could appreciate it.
Right. Yeah. At least they need to throw in a line of dialogue where they can explain away how that's happening. Oh, the anti-scaling law.
So your book is not just about math; it's about the meaning of math in the world.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, for me. That's what's exciting. I always enjoyed math in school, but I kind of enjoyed lots of subjects. And what I like about math as a writer and a teacher is it gives you access to all these different worlds. That math is in few places is it adequate to solve a problem entirely, but in so many places it's a vital tool. And so I like, for me, getting math is like this grid. It's like getting on the subway and being able to go from place to place to place, and I can get all around the city just using mathematics, and pop up in places that are interesting and fun to explore.
So you had those first 70 pages. Who read it for you? Who gave you feedback? What happened after that?
Yeah. So for that first book, a lot of it was sort of internet tested. So the opening
put your
chapter.
Wife through that. I'm glad to hear you didn't put your wife.
But, well, my wife is a research mathematician, so
oh really?
In some ways, she's so she's in some ways the wrong audience because
she's the wrong audience for this.
Yeah, that's right. No, the things that are sort of novel to her are maybe not the things that are not that will be novel to a reader. So my editor who's edited a number of popular science books, but she's an English major in college. She's closer.
So how did you get your editor?
My own
the 70 pages to someone. Did she ask you to prepare the 70 pages?
Yeah, it's funny. My path through publishing is weird, and
I like weird.
Makes me seem very low agency. I'd been thinking as I was writing my blog, like, I'll keep developing material, and at some point I'll have enough to pitch a book maybe. And then my editor reached out to me, having seen a piece I did, a freelance piece I'd written, I think, or maybe it was a blog post that had gone viral, some jokes about statistics that I'd made, and just reached out to me and said, hey, would you want to do a book? And that was, I wanted to.
So someone read your blog posts.
Yeah.
And then said, would you like to do a book?
Yeah. This was 2016.
Well, mental note,
so
there's a benefit to blogging here.
That's right. Yeah. I think, other people who do a lot of online writing that I've spoken to, not that it'll automatically lead to a book deal. I think I was very fortunate to have that happen. But it does, putting your ideas out there means that people who are drawn to your kind of thinking can reach out to you. So
I completely agree with that, because we had a blog that became a multi-legged empire. Started with a blog.
Yeah.
So I can completely see the benefit. So you had a blog, an editor wrote to you. You didn't think it was spam or someone trying to steal your 401k account. You responded to her. She didn't ask for money.
Yeah.
She didn't want to marry you. She didn't ask for anything. And then you just sent her some pages?
Let's see. How did it go? So I had literary agents at the time. So I've been spinning my wheels. They would have reached out to me in a similar way.
So what's the difference between a literary agent and an agent?
Just that's an agent. I mean, I think you can have different kinds of agents. So I don't know, film actors.
You're just like Carrie Bradshaw in the math world, right? Yeah. So your agent then took your book and she presented to her team.
My agent and I had been working, and it's two agents who work together, actually, Steve and Dado. But we had been working to come up with a book proposal that we were going to shop around to different publishers. And I was actually having trouble coming up with one I was satisfied with. But it didn't feel like there was any urgency because we weren't pitching it yet. We were just kind of slowly developing ideas. And then while we were in that process, then editor reached out to me. And I could sort of see where I was a little bit stuck on the proposal. So basically, I just got out of my own way.
So this was before the 70 pages, right?
Yeah, this was before. Yeah, some of those had sort of started to develop. Early versions of those had started to develop online. But yeah, no, there wasn't even really a shape to the book yet. I think both my agents and my editor had a sense that Math with Bad Drawings was a sort of cute brand that would make a
Yes.
cute book. And that was sort of it. So that first book, when we signed the contract, there wasn't a super detailed plan for the book yet.
Yeah.
I think it was a sort of more like a
The
one
minimum
page
viable
pitch.
product, as they say.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, maybe even below the level of viability. It turned out to, later rose above that level. But yeah, so that book, it came together in a bit of a hurry. I sort of wrote it in the course of about 5 months, and the first part of that was while I was still finishing up a full-time teaching job. So it all happened very fast. I didn't really have a chance to think too hard about it. I just knew this was an extremely exciting thing for me. I love writing. I'd always loved writing.
Yes.
And so the chance to do this book was magical, just fallen into my lap. And so even though I hadn't really been clever enough to arrange that opportunity for myself, once it landed in my lap, I knew I had to, to take advantage of it.
And how long
and
did it take you
so-
to finish the entire book?
I mean, I did though. I guess those first 70 pages, like I said, those were the ones that took the longest. I was sort of poking at those and prodding at it. It was a very iterative writing
But
process.
the first
sort
book,
of,
how long did that take?
Yeah, I mean, so those first 70 pages, I spent probably 4 months kind of slowly picking away at them.
4 months.
And then, yeah, well, and then the next 300 pages I needed to write, I only had 4 months left to write them. So
That is true.
The rest of the book.
Time is money. And I mean, you do have a dedicated
Yeah.
closet, from what I can see, to do your writing.
Yeah.
I make a joke about that, but I actually found that I did some of my best work in a closet. And now I have a fancy offices and I got assistants and so on to help me with things.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's actually made my life easier. And I've had to get rid of a lot of people because, you can't get inspiration from other people, right?
Yeah.
It comes from within. It doesn't matter how many assistants you have. It doesn't matter the size of your office is. In fact, in some ways, it's nice to be with your family when you're writing. You open your door and your kids are right there.
Yeah. If you've got a door, you can close it. At least.
If you can close it. Okay, so your first book, you finish it in like 8 months, I'm guessing 9 months?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. It was sort of about, I don't know, from when we signed the contract. I signed the contract in October, and then I delivered the finished manuscript the next October. But the first few months were kind of outlining, and most of the writing happened between May and October.
So just for everyone listening here, you can have two nice kids that draw pictures for you. You can have a wife. You can be a teacher in math and get paid money to write about it.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a proof.
That's the American dream right there.
Of that. Yeah.
So your first book comes out. Who's the first person beyond your editors who read your book?
Oh, good question. I'd been reading chapters to my wife as I went along.
Yeah.
And that book, actually, because it was such a, even more so than the books that followed, each of which sort of dove deeper into a particular area of math. That one, there's a chapter on baseball statistics and the chapter on lottery tickets and the chapter on digital humanities, kind of statistical analysis of literature. And so each of those chapters, I had to ask somebody who knew better than I did, right? Like I could go and do a week of reading and learn as much as I could, and I wasn't trying to establish new truths at the research frontier. I was trying to give a nice, fun popularization. But almost chapter for chapter, I went and found people who were more expert than I was. And so that book was sort of vetted at first, mostly by experts. I went to some folks in research psychology for the chapter on p-values and p-hacking.
Which age group was this?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, adults. Like, that was really who I was picturing at the time. I was picturing a curious adult nonfiction reader. And in practice, it's something that, like, middle school and high school kids who love math really enjoy.
Sweet Valley High,
a lot of the copies go.
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah. I don't really know. It's funny because a lot of the chapters I wouldn't have done if I'd been thinking of that audience. There's a chapter exploring sort of downside risk and the mathematics of downside risk, but through a series of weird forms of insurance. Particularly Lloyd's in London offers all kinds of, like, very quirky insurance policies. Like, you can just go to the analyst there and they'll insure anything. If they'll just crunch some numbers, or insurance if you're running some kind of charity golf tournament and you're giving $1 million for a hole in one. How do you insure that? What's the fair price for insuring the risk against that? Because you, as the charity, don't want to have to pay out the $1 million yourself. And so it was a series of weird little insurance policies like that, which if I'd been writing for, if I was thinking of a 14-year-old reader, I would not have been like, we'll really connect with 14-year-olds.
Yes.
Weird insurance policies. Like that
So
was
you were
definitely meant
writing
for,
what you thought was interesting to you to explain
yeah,
mathematics, and then you found your audience.
yeah, I think that's right. And I think my editor was very helpful with that because my own right my bachelor's degree is in pure mathematics. That's my wife is a pure mathematician, so I get pulled a little bit that direction towards just the development of ideas for their own sake. And my editor was very good about pulling me back towards something a little realer, something a little more concrete.
I guess
And
someone listening to
so
this podcast is going to think, "Am I an impure mathematician?
yeah,
Something
yeah,
wrong
well,
with me?"
we're all that's the human state is to be an impure mathematician. We're all a little bit tainted by our
That'll be
experience of
all the
physical reality.
engineers listening to this, impure
That's right.
mathematicians.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So
there's a good
you
line
have
from
this book, you put it
yeah, go
out
ahead. Yeah,
there,
yeah.
and how do you promote a book when the audience is not clear?
Yeah, yeah, good question. I mean, I have my publisher is great. I love my publisher. And Kara is my in-house publicist, and Betsy is the publisher. So they work on distribution and on getting some attention in media and things like that. But that said, in the 21st century, publishers only know so much about kind of the changing media landscape. So a
Yes.
lot of it was having a presence in social media. I post cartoons and things like that on social media, just little jokes about math. Um, and so and so part of it was just having that audience out there who was already excited to see what I was working on. Um, and
Yes.
then aside from that, I wish I had a recipe for it, but I don't know. I like the thing I know. The only thing I really know how to do is make the book as good as I can, and hope that it'll have good word of mouth. Mine aren't books. I think a lot of nonfiction sells half its copies in the first month. It comes out on
Yes.
September 1st, and by September 30th, you've sold most of what you're going to sell. Because it's very topical and it's like sort of capturing a moment in the news. And my books are not like that. I mean, the book I wrote in 2018, I really could have written it today, or I could. Well, hopefully, most of it could be written again in 10 years. There's nothing. There's nothing super news pegged about it. They're evergreen books in the sort of language of the business. So since my books are evergreen, that's kind of nice. They sort of sell at a trickle, and you
Yes.
want just good word of mouth.
Yeah, we found the same thing with our books because we write for a corporate audience. They always are being bought, and sometimes universities prescribe them as textbooks, and we get a message from a professor saying, "Hey, I'm using your book." But what we've
Mm,
also found is releasing the book in September works very well because it gets picked up with the holiday recommendations,
yeah,
and that works very well. But I want to come back to what makes you do this. That's the reason I wanted to interview you because when I speak to people, I mean, I know guys who run hedge funds and private equity firms and so on. And while they talk about what they're doing, but it always comes back to the fact that they have this belief that they need to make money to have an impact. So here you are, someone who is not, I think, not driven by money, but you
yeah.
enjoy what you do.
As you can see, I mean, there are windows in this room, but yeah, you can tell from the windowless wall. I'm hanging out in the basement where I have my desk. Right, it's like a nice finished basement. But yeah, no, I think no, I would say in my career I've probably left money on the table. Publishing is not where you go if you're like, yeah, this is. I am definitely motivated by what my bank account's going to look like at the end of this decade. Um, sorry, I rambled. The question is sort of like what
No, it's a
motivates me?
good
What do I get
question. So,
excited about?
so, so why
Yeah.
why do you write,
Uh,
and why did you go into the
yeah,
field of math and teaching?
yeah, yeah. I love to write. I've always loved writing since I was a kid. I guess writing you can sculpt, writing you can perfect. Um, and writing and teaching make a really nice yin and yang in that way because writing you can polish, writing you can wait and
Yes,
till you've figured out just the right thing to say. And teaching you absolutely cannot. I cannot, do a lesson and then at the end be like, I thought of a better version of that lesson. Scratch that out. Nobody remember that lesson. We're
I've
gonna do it.
actually
Yeah,
done
you
that. I mean, I've done that a few times.
right. I guess you can sort of try, right? I mean, you can teach it again, right? I've done that many times. But it's not quite like telling the jury, like that evidence is stricken from the record. You're not allowed to take that into account in your deliberations. Like what's happened in the classroom has happened. That's now in people's memory. You've spent that
Yes.
hour of their lives doing that. And teaching is improvisational and interactive and you need to respond to the human beings there in front of you. And writing is solitary and you're sculpting something.
So
So I
you've
think,
built a
when I was finished,
lifestyle around writing, books,
Yeah.
teaching?
I think when I was finishing college, that was sort of like that was what I wanted. As I thought teaching part time and writing part time. I thought that's a nice combo. I did, and that sort of describes a lot of academic jobs, but academia didn't appeal to me. I think the kind of specialization involved didn't draw me in. And it wasn't, I don't know. I think in some ways I'm not drawn towards competitive spaces. There's a
Yeah.
part of me that thinks if I'm entering a very competitive space, like there's 8 other people who want to do this thing, like
So no
more
math
men can do
Olympiad for
it.
you.
There's other, yeah. I took those questions sometimes, but yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, it wasn't, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, competition doesn't drive me. And I think that makes me sort of unusual. That's a quirk of my personality that competition doesn't appeal. But I'm sure there are others who have that profile. But usefulness appeals. So like being
Yes.
useful is really important to me. I really like just knowing that the work I'm doing is that someone finds it valuable. So I'm more sort of socially driven in that way. And teaching, not that middle school students always express gratitude to their math teacher because they don't always feel that gratitude. It's a weird experience to be a middle schooler. But the usefulness of that work is
Yes.
very evident. It's right there. You never have to wonder if the people you're trying to help are worth helping, or if the work you're doing is worth trying to do well. Like I don't know if you love education, which I do, then you know it's worthwhile. Uh, and so like for me, yeah, how much I make during my career has never really been the motivator. I want to have enough money to live the
Yes.
lifestyle that I enjoy. But that's not that's not in my top 3 priorities, I would say.
So I'm guessing your editors and publishers have plans to launch the book in China and Korea, where they treat tutors of math like rock stars. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the number one tutor for math in Korea is bigger than Taylor Swift in Korea.
That's funny. That's very cool. I don't know much about Korean math culture. I've been trying to actually talk to the
Wait, are
we
you
have
telling me that
translations.
you guys don't have a plan for Korea and China?
No. So we do actually. I mean, my books have been translated into both Korean and
No, you got to
Chinese.
go there.
And
You got to
actually,
do book signings, play a guitar like Taylor Swift and everything.
that'd be fun. I don't know a word of Korean, but that'd be fun. Yeah, sure. I mean, I can do. My guitar is probably slightly better than my Korean, so I could play a couple of chords.
I mean, that's how our business started because we had a blog
Mm.
and we would write about these technical things in business. And then these students from Korea wrote to us and say, well, we actually knew them a little bit, but they wrote to us and said, hey, you guys can do this. Why don't you teach us these things? And then our business started from there. Because we do find that
That's
in the
interesting.
Asian economies, there's a absolute focus on understanding math and being good at math and
Yeah.
finding the best tools to learn math. And it starts really early. It starts even pre-teen. Actually, 5-year-olds are doing math Olympiads and learning and so on. So if you're not looking
Yeah.
at Korea and China, I think it's not just about translating it, it's about going there and actually
That'll be fun.
becoming part of it.
I'll have to talk to my publisher, talk to my Korean publisher too. I've been trying to set up something where the time zones are a little bit different. So been having trouble scheduling a call with them. But yeah, Korean. I mean, that makes sense what you're saying, because actually the book, like my first book, has sold not maybe half as many copies in Korea and South Korea as it sold in the US, maybe a little more than that.
You're not
But
looking at your own data. There it is. The data
uh,
is there.
yeah, it's a little more than half of as many copies that sold in South Korea as it's sold in the U.S. That's on a much smaller population, so clearly per capita
Much
there is
smaller
much more
population, but
demand. Yeah,
obsessed about education, right?
yeah.
One of the things I'm going to switch gears here a little bit.
Yeah,
So let's step out of math a little bit, right? Math is a complex
yeah.
subject.
Mhm.
So what advice would you have for someone trying to learn a complex subject? Forget about the math. It's a complex subject that's
Yeah.
intimidating, scary. They may have a history of also being bad at it. What would you advise them to do to shake it off? Again, I'm quoting Taylor Swift here. I got to stop doing that.
Yeah. I would say first step is probably take stock of your assets as a learner, and sort
Yeah.
of your style as a learner. I don't want to overstate there's some universals to learning, and there's some research out there that tries to make individual style seem like it's more than it is. But I think it's the case that some people learn much better from reading than from other media, and some people learn much better from
Yes.
video. So I think knowing what medium is going to be your best form of input is important to know. Um, and also for me, I'm a very social learner. So
Yes.
for me, like a text that's incredibly crisp and clear, but without much individual voice, is not as helpful as a text where I can get a sense of the writer. Like it's some sort of personality to the voice is very important to me. So knowing what kind of inputs, what kind of sources are going to be most useful for you. And then I would keep in mind the sort of there's a lot of recent educational research in something called cognitive load theory. That basically how much you can hold in working memory is a pretty tight bottleneck on what you can learn. So
Yeah.
you don't want to overload working memory, and particularly with a complex subject where there's going to be a lot of moving pieces. You need to sort of find someone who's broken it into chunks for you and acquire the chunks in a gradual fashion. And I think also finding what's the right size time block. It's rarely going to be 4 hours of trying to do something intensively learning. That's probably too long. Sort of, I think for most people, it's going to range anywhere from sort of like 20 minutes to 2 hours as being the right time scale to devote each day to trying to learn something new. Practicing more than you think you need to is another
Yeah.
good piece of advice.
I don't think your clients in Korea will have a problem practicing more than they need to.
Yeah. Right. I mean, you can right at some point there's diminishing marginal returns, and then you can be doing practice that's not really bringing much benefit.
So I really enjoyed this. I'm looking
Cool.
forward to
Thanks
your
for the
next
conversation.
book and the one that's going to come thereafter. Ben, thank you so
We'll
much.
see.
An absolute
Cool.
pleasure. It's
All right.
really nice to speak to someone who's has passion for what they do. So I applaud everything you're doing, and I wish you great success.
Well, thanks. Yeah. I appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Take care. Ciao. As we wrap up, today's podcast is sponsored by strategytraining.com. If you want to strengthen your strategy skills, you can get the overall approach used in well-managed strategy studies as a free download. Go to firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. And if you're looking to advance your career and need to update your resume, you can get a McKinsey and BCG winning resume template example as a free download at www.firmsconsulting.com/resume PDF.